Here's Randy Brock.
Rob, thank you very, very, very much, and thank you all for coming today. I always try to put something in Facebook after I go to a place. At least I did during my last campaign. And as I was mentioning to some folks here earlier today, I go back and I read that, and they all read like restaurant reviews, because I always talk about the food, and that's what's so great about coming to the Track Inn. As I remember this from coming in February, these are the best breakfasts that I've seen, and that may be a factor, other than the speaker, as to why you have such great turnouts. And it's a lesson that we can learn, I think, up in Franklin County. Well, many of you I know, many of you I've known for quite a number of years, but many of you don't know me, and so I thought I'd start by just telling you a little something about me. And for those of you who've heard these before, recognize that each time I add a little bit more, so there will be a morsel that you haven't heard here before. I was born in Philadelphia, and like the old jokes go, I was there at the time. If you remember W.C. Fields, we used to say first prize is a week in Philadelphia. Second prize is 2 weeks in Philadelphia. Well, I was born in that Philadelphia. And I grew up there, and I didn't get to Vermont until I went to college. My parents were college graduates, which was pretty rare for African Americans who grew up during the Depression. And my mother got to college because her father died in uniform in World War II, or during World War I should say. And so she got to go to college on the GI Bill. My father got a basketball scholarship, and he was 5 feet 7 inches tall. And so he got to college, first in their families to go to college. But the point in all of that was that there was no question with parents like that I was going to college. The only question was, how do you pay for it? Because they weren't wealthy folks. My father got a law degree, in fact, after World War II, where he served in Europe on the GI Bill. But he never practiced law. He was a small businessman. I remember a couple of things that my parents always said. My mother started out as a school teacher, first in a one-room schoolhouse, and then as a high school French teacher. This was in the South in the late 30s. She went to her 60th high school reunion, I remember. And the 60th high school reunion that she went to, and I helped her write her remarks that she gave, because she went because she was the teacher of that 60th high school reunion class. They both lived very long and full and happy lives. They were married before my father passed away, or my mother passed away first. They had been married, I think, 63 years at that point. It was a very close-knit family. And as I mentioned, there was no question but what I was going to college. And the issue of paying for it became very, very apparent. And people asked me, why did I go to Middlebury College, which is where I went? And the answer is because they offered me the most money. Money was a factor in going to college. Because my father was a small business person, as I mentioned, who complained every single night of his entire life that he was in business, that the government was trying to put him out of business with taxes and regulation. My mother, when she moved to Philadelphia from the South to marry my father, ultimately became a civil servant. She was in the welfare department, the Department of Public Assistance, as an assistant district supervisor. She always complained that we're giving away money to people who don't deserve it and who are milking the system. Even though she was very compassionate, she was dedicated as a social worker, she pointed out to me constantly how the system was being abused by people who were being unfair to everyone else in what they did. And again, that's something that just lasted in the back of my mind. Well, the college experience was great for me, because once I got here, I was able to say I wasn't born in Vermont, but I got here as soon as I could, which is useful on the campaign trail, I hear, in Vermont. And I enjoyed Middlebury. It was an absolutely great place. Met lots of great people, including the owner of the Track Inn, Charlie Rogers, who was in my class at Middlebury. When I got out of Middlebury, I had a degree in history, which obviously prepares you to do great things in the world. And I learned the lesson of getting that degree that I should go on and get another degree also in history, which I did, which made me even less prepared to do anything practical. So I did what every young man ought to do at that point. I joined the Army and learned a trade. I was commissioned in the Army and in the Military Police Corps. And so I was an MP, and I served at all kinds of places. And one thing, every place that I served that was good, the Army has since closed. And it's probably because they didn't have enough snakes, scorpions, or spiders, which is a prerequisite, as you know, for a successful Army base. I spent a year in Vietnam, which was far less dangerous than the year I spent at Fort Dix, New Jersey. As an MP, Fort Dix was an experience, that's all I can tell you. But the Army was great because it taught me lots of skills. You know, I was a logistics officer, I was a police operations officer, I was a criminal investigations officer, I was a management analyst, and I was an information officer. An information officer in the Army is a great term. It really is a disinformation officer. You know, I learned things like being able to say, I can neither confirm nor deny that, and you can't quote me. Which was great fun. I did learn, though, a couple of good things in the Army. One of the things is it taught me that when you're 24, 25, 26 years of age, you can do great things because people throw you into situations that you're totally unprepared for, and you either sink or you swim. And you get responsibilities that, as a young person of that age, you could never get in civilian life. And I found that very, very valuable, very, very valuable experience. I left the Army after approximately 5 years, 2 months, and 21 days, and came back to Vermont as a place of opportunity. And I went into business. I went into the private security business, and I started a company with myself in the second bedroom of my mobile home that I had. And the business grew over time from just me to a company that, at the time I sold it, had approximately 1,000 employees in 11 or 12 states in the province of Quebec. And I sold it to a public company. And that company then got bought by another company, which got bought by another company, which got bought by another company, because the private security industry at that time was very much like the banking industry today. I kept the consulting portion of the business and thought, well, you know, I'm going to do consulting, and I did some very interesting things from a wide variety of clients, from a large hospital in New York City, where I learned more about saline solution than you would ever want to know, because their saline solution was disappearing. And they kept wondering why they were buying so much saline solution. And we finally did a calculation that the amount of saline solution that they bought in any given period of time would not have fit in the warehouse that they had for saline solution. And so that was a problem. What happened? Well, we figured out what happened. And the answer was it never fit because it never got there. Through paperwork manipulation and fraud. I did a lot of fraud-related inquiries as a consultant. To doing things like for the Attorney General of Utah, testifying as an expert witness on a problem that they had purchasing security services for nuclear plants in the state of Utah. And there, that I also found fascinating. You know, I qualified as an expert witness that I learned in the courts because I was from more than 50 miles away and I had a dark suit. And that is usually the qualification that will get you on the stand as an expert, and I did that quite well. But more and more and more, I came to work for a particular company, Fidelity Investments in Boston. And there for Fidelity, I did something called crime risk analysis. And that was a fascinating job. I went all over the world during almost every business that Fidelity had. And this is both in the US and Australia and Singapore and the UK, and looked at business operations and planned how to steal from them. And that's crime risk analysis. It's a technique. It's a sort of an audit-related technique. You look, if you were a thief, how would you steal from this business? And then once you figure that out, figure out how you can prevent it from happening in the first place. It's a really proactive strategy, and I did that for quite a while. And ultimately, I got an offer from Fidelity, like the Godfather says, the offer that you can't refuse, and I joined Fidelity. I started as head of their corporate security group and head of a corporate security subsidiary that Fidelity owned. And I did that for a few years and then went on to go overseas. And I went overseas to head corporate administration outside North America. And that's for Europe, Asia, Bermuda, and so on. And there it was a fascinating job because it had a bunch of groups that you oversaw, one of which was to figure out where we've got to put businesses, such as mutual fund businesses or administrative activities or operations centers, in what country. And there, again, you pick up things. Everything you do, you pick up something new that you learn. And I remember in particular Ireland, which reminded me so much of Vermont. And in Ireland, looking at where to place a business, I remember dealing with the Irish officials who said, well, we got tax credits and we've got enterprise zones and we've got other kinds of subsidies and we've got building loans, but tell us what you want. We're flexible. Let's go have a Guinness. That stuck with me. That attitude was so different because it was an attitude in government that said, we're here to do what you want, not to make you conform to the programs that we have. And we can operate on a clean piece of paper and we can do it for you. And there it told me again a lesson. And that lesson is that it's not just tone at the top in an organization that makes a difference. It's tone in the middle. The middle of the organization, the people who interact with you on a day-to-day basis, if they can think on their own and show some initiative and have some flexibility, it makes a difference. And it also makes a difference to a business that interacts with a government. If the people in that government, regardless of what they have to give you, really want you and want to help make you succeed, that makes a difference, that attitude in government. It's an attitude that worked very well for Ireland. We put an operations center there. We domiciled mutual funds there. We put a software business there that writes software for our U.S. businesses, and we put it in Ireland because of the Irish government and the way Ireland. And the other thing I noticed about Ireland, too, at that time, it reminded me a lot of Vermont because they had a problem with kids. They had the largest number per capita of college graduates in Europe, all of whom got their education and went someplace else. They either went to the continent or they went to the U.S. because there weren't the jobs in Ireland to hire them. And the Irish government in their program, they designed the programs to attract business in order to deal with this problem of the outflow of their youth and to be able to get them to come back. And they did reverse that flow. And that was a great success story until they screwed it up the way they dealt with the banking industry. But that's another story. And it's also a separate story. We have that same problem, as you know, here in Vermont, in which we have the exodus of youth. We have, again, the highest per capita number of colleges in the United States in Vermont, and we have a problem with the drain, a brain drain from Vermont. And it's, again, something to think about. When we talk about education in a minute, I'll come back to that. So I came back from the U.S., from the UK. I was based in the UK, and then I became general auditor at Fidelity. And I didn't know that much about being a general auditor, I'll confess. I didn't admit it at the time when I got offered the job, but I hark back to the days that I spent both in business and the days that I spent in the Army. The Army really taught me those skills in the year plus that I spent as a management analyst and heading a management branch at the Armor Center at Fort Knox. And so I became general auditor. And auditor in a business like that is not just to say,